So the other day I got home and my wife reminded me that we had gotten some weed killer shipped in this weekend. So I went out and I was spraying some weeds. It just occurred to me we had a lot of weeds, and I actually went through the entire bottle of Roundup, believe it or not. And then I found $20 because that's how you end a story no one cares about. Am I right? Were you inspired to care about my lawn, Ben?
No.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode, this final episode of season 7 of Cross Checking. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Laborious. I'm a pastor out in the Houston area, down in Friendswood. And with me, as always, is Ben from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Lake Orion, Michigan. We're happy to be here with you today. And so I don't forget to do it later. If you have any ideas for what our next season should be about, go ahead and toss it in the comments or send us a text. We would welcome the ideas.
Yeah, we would. For sure.
So what are we talking about today, Ben?
So, unlike Josh's inspiring speech here, we want to talk about, one, why you should care about all of the stuff we've been talking about, and two, how you get other people to care about being a part of the church and doing life together and all these great things. So to do that, Josh, I want to know if there was a moment in your life where a switch flipped, or you felt like it was maybe a bit of a turning point that made you start to care about your faith.
I mean, to be totally fair to everyone listening to this, in case you were unaware, I grew up Lutheran. My dad was the director of Christian education, born and bred. There's never been a moment where, at least intellectually, that wasn't part of who I am. But I think I can point to a moment where I really started to take ownership and I would say it's a little bit of a turning point for, I guess, my caring about the faith, my commitment to Christianity. And not to be too stereotypical, but I want to point to the National Youth Gathering. Actually, no, hold on. The mission trip the summer after my 8th grade year. I was trying to remember what order. No, that was a youth gathering year. It was my youth group growing up. We did summer trips every single year. If it was a National Youth Gathering year, we went to the gathering. If it wasn't, we did a mission trip. So it was a gathering year, and we went to the gathering, and
after 8th grade?
Yeah.
Because we were in the same grade. So
yes.
That would have been, after 8th grade would have been a mission trip year for you, because the first youth gathering that I went to was after my freshman year.
Okay, so never mind. It was a mission trip. I'm not quite as basic as I could be. But we went on this mission trip, and I just remember, here's why I can't remember the trip itself. Because it wasn't the trip that made me think of this being kind of the turning point. I remember what happened afterward. Because I remembered at the very last service, and Dad did this every single year, at the very last worship time we had together, he would go around and he'd say, your faith shouldn't just be something you work on for 1 week a year. So he would say, and I think he had little cards for it, or maybe he just handed out note cards. He said, put down on this card how you're going to keep that growth going. And if you want, you can put your name on it, you can turn it in, and I'll kind of help you be accountable to that. And I remember that I put down on the card, I'm going to read the Bible in a year. And I started that practice. And along with that, I also started taking much more seriously the habit of praying every night before I went to bed. So that was kind of where it started to become this is something I care about. This is something I take seriously. And that's I think, what I would point to probably above any other single moment or single thing. So I guess being challenged, to think big picture, what was it that made me take my faith seriously? It was someone saying hey, this is worth taking seriously, so what are you going to do about it? What does that look like? So what about you, Ben?
I think for me, it was probably just finding the right group of friends to do community with and develop faith with. When I got to high school, Josh and I both, I think, fall into this category of being annoyingly smart. We hold on to random knowledge that is useful for very few things other than each other. But that served me well when it came to things like confirmation class. I knew all the answers, stuff stuck. It wasn't hard for me to kind of just fake my way through it. Yeah, exactly. Pass the quizzes, pass the test, fake my way through it. It didn't really sink in until I got to high school, and I I remember like going to chapel in high school for the first time, and it was just a wildly different experience because there were people like paying attention and singing, which if you're in middle school, it's not cool to sing in chapel. I went to Christian schools all the way through, but like it was not cool to sing in chapel in middle school. It was cool. Well, it still wasn't cool to sing in chapel in high school.
Let's not overstep here.
It was much more like a part of the culture of the school to
Yeah.
take your faith seriously and to engage in worship. And I'm really thankful for that because it taught me to like participate in my faith and not just like know stuff. And got
I like
into,
that. Participate in your faith. I like that. That's a good way to put it.
yeah, got into, more theological discussions that I could ever count in high school. Was part of a Wednesday. A school's got great culture when it can get its male students to school by 6:45 on a Wednesday to study the Bible together. Like that's darn impressive. And I'm thankful for our pastor slash janitor Lucini Fofana. Great guy, great guy. He had an impact on me. My theology teachers had an impact on me. But like they were the ones that really pushed me to go, your faith is about more than just knowing stuff. It's about doing stuff too. They were the ones that got me to care because they cared, and seeing that is inspiring, I think.
I think you're right. I hope you're right. I do. I don't think Ben or I fall into this trap, but it's a trap I've seen a lot of our peers fall into because we obviously care a lot about this stuff. That's why we're pastors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we didn't just do it for the fancy robes on Sunday. There were other reasons.
As you can see, my fancy robe is like I forgot to pull the sleeve back out.
Our MVP listener is gonna love how well arrayed it is and not be bothered by the unevenness at all. Like my wonderful jersey up here. We care a lot about this stuff, but there takes some awareness of not everybody cares enough about this stuff. And here's the thing: when we're at the seminary where you study to become a pastor, all of the students at the seminary are also studying to become pastors. And they also care a lot about this stuff. And all the professors were at one point, with a couple exceptions, but were at one point pastors who care a lot about this stuff, who cared so much about this stuff that they went ahead and got a doctorate in this stuff. So the seminary, you are constantly surrounded by people who care a lot about the Bible and theology and Lutheran tradition and all of this kind of stuff. And I've had interactions with pastors who sometimes don't realize that that's weird, that the average person in a congregation, certainly the average person in like regular society, does not care nearly that much. And I think because there is a little bit of a lack of awareness there, this is something the seminary does not prepare you for at all. They teach you a lot of good, great, phenomenal theology. I don't think I ever had it mentioned. How do you get people to care about knowing this stuff, about doing this stuff, about participating in their faith? How do you inspire people to do that? So that's where, and Ben maybe can bring some optimism to this conversation. I'm hoping. Because I've reached a point, and I gotta give props to my Hope people. And this isn't a knock on previous congregations, but I gotta give props to especially a few of my Hope people because you guys are starting to turn the wheel a little bit for me. But I had reached a point where my default assumption was that no one cared. And I've met a lot of people here at Hope who very much care. And they ask questions that signal that they care. And they're like, I have one guy, I see him 4 days a week. He does not work here. He has no he's in Bible class, he's in Sunday morning worship, he's in a small group that I'm a part of, and very frequently we'll have another vendor in the week that he's also, so I see him 4 days a week. And that's awesome because what that tells me is he clearly cares about this stuff, about theology, about the Bible, about the church. So I'm seeing glimmers, but my default assumption is still kind of no one cares about this stuff. How do I get people to care?
Yeah, I've run into that in different ways in different places. And I think it's very much down to the culture of the congregation and to the culture that the pastor or previous pastors have kind of instilled as to whether people care. And here,
so props to Pastor Ralph.
yeah, I'll throw out some props to the previous pastors here. There were issues in this church where there were people who did not care, that were butting heads with people who did. And a lot of the people who didn't care left. Perhaps all of the people who didn't care left. But the people who cared about this place stuck around, even when it was down to 30 people on a Sunday morning. And this church is now starting to turn it around. And one of the common refrains that I get from people who walk in the door as visitors is, it's really nice to walk into a place and meet people that seem to care. Not just about their faith, but about the people that are walking through their doors.
And I think part of that goes back to what you were saying earlier, like seeing other people who care can almost have an inspirational, like if you're like, oh wow, this people here think this stuff is really important. That can at least invite others to also realize how important this stuff is.
Potentially start to care. Yeah. And I think, caring can also look different for different people, right? Not everybody who cares is going to go to seminary.
No, it takes a different
It is
kind
a
of
place
crazy.
where you find a litany of people who do care, but it's not the only place that you find them. And I think one of the reasons, Josh, that maybe you felt like we were not trained to figure out how to teach people and disciple people into caring was because it was almost kind of made up to some extent that there was this illusion of people who, like, that there would only be people who did care. And that's just it's not the case.
Not the case.
In a good church, and this is not meant to be a shot at anyone in particular, at any given time, you might be someone that cares, or you might not be somebody that cares. We go through seasons. That happens. But at any given time, in a good church, maybe 2/3 of the people care. And the last third could be anywhere from doesn't care to ambivalent.
Yeah. I think we can rule out there probably aren't going to be a lot of hostile actors in the church. I mean, I guess there could theoretically be some, but
yeah, that's true. That's true. So, Josh, I don't know if you've had this experience at some point in your ministry yet, but if you have, where you've had somebody that didn't seem to care and then started to care, what did it for them?
I've seen a couple different things that light that kind of fire. None enough that I would be willing to say this consistently does it.
You mean you can't programize this?
No, you cannot.
Huh. It's almost like we should have done an episode on that. Oh, wait.
We
We
did.
did.
Look at that. It's almost like we planned it. We did it,
Oh,
but it's almost like we did.
maybe. Don't pat yourself on the back too much. There's already a bruise there.
Maybe that's why my bicep tendon is acting up. No, so one of the ways I've seen it is to kind of elevate give someone some responsibility. Sometimes works as far as like building ownership. So lifting someone up to, I'd like you to serve on this board or this team, or I'd like you to help organize this thing or volunteer in this role. But from what I've seen, at least, that tends to go both ways. Like some people, they'll be lifted up and they'll take ownership and they'll run with it and they'll start to really care about all this stuff. Some people will go the other way. And some of that depends on what the leadership culture at your church is. Like if meetings are painful and when you go to them, you see people not acting like Christians, it's probably not going to help. Okay. So kind of lifting them up. Another way I've seen it is, and I've seen this maybe most consistently, is once you start to get people plugged into small groups, or you just kind of give them a place to make real friends at church. So there are a couple guys, some of them were more engaged than others, but it was literally 3 guys. But because I really like, one of my things, and if you're at my congregation, you know this, is I push community, like just be together, just spend time together. And these guys started just spending time together and hanging out on a weekly basis. And it wasn't like a Bible study. They weren't doing anything like that. They were just hanging out every week. But you saw their average church attendance go up. You saw their willingness to participate in extra things, retreats, Bible studies, that kind of stuff. The willingness to get involved went up. So their caring very much went up because they were more relationally connected to the congregation. So that I've seen work. And then there's also, this is maybe the most fleeting one, and this is something that you would want to think very carefully before you took this step. Sometimes people will care more when the most obvious issues they see in a church are resolved, or things change to better suit their preferences. So this can be good and bad. It tends to be like if there's a glaring problem, like if someone doesn't care because they look at the church and all they see is conflict, and you come in and work to reconcile that, and you reconcile, this has been an unequivocally good thing, right? But their frustration with the problem is kind of what keeps them from caring. But then you also have maybe someone prefers traditional worship and the church you're at is contemporary. So you switch to traditional worship and they suddenly really buy in because the worship style is now more in line with their preference. I mean, it's good that they're bought in, but the fundamental reason for it might have been a little shallow. And there might be more discipleship that needs to happen there. If your engagement with the church is solely based on how closely the church aligns with your just like individual preferences and opinions, we might need to work on that. But those are some of the things I have seen. What about you?
I think the big one that you mentioned that I want to just reemphasize is being engaged with other Christians, because Christianity is a team sport. It is. We are the body of Christ.
Oh, that's great. I don't think I've ever heard it phrased like that before. I appreciate that.
You are one among many. You are not.
I'm trying to think what team sport we would be.
You ever read about the rules of medieval soccer?
I didn't know medieval soccer existed.
Okay. So
now I'm just picturing knights in armor playing soccer, and that's hilarious.
No, but it was a full town activity. So the goals would be set up on the opposite ends of town, and you had to get the ball from one end of town to the other. And there were very few rules dictating what you could and couldn't do. And
that sounds like so much fun.
It really does, yeah. That's kind of what I picture Christianity operating as like. Like, you are a half of a town cooperating together, attempting to get something through the goal. And that something could be any litany of things. It could be getting a child to the font for baptism. It could be bringing an adult from outside the faith into the faith. It could be helping a long-standing member of the church run the race with endurance. You can look up what that means on your own time, because I don't want to downer this episode any more than we already have. That could be bringing a child from the faith of their parents to that faith being their own. It could be finding ways to serve the community and meet a need that's present in your community. There are so many goals that the church can score. And when we do that together as a community, and we get people invested in that community and get people invested in doing the work of God together, I think it can really inspire an attitude of caring. Because when you're invested in one part of the life of the church, it's a lot easier to see how all the other pieces connect and start to care about those more too.
Yeah. I think with that, it's worth, they don't have to start caring with what you maybe see as the most important thing. Because if you get a hook somewhere else, that makes subsequent objects of care easier to get bought into.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one big one. And then I think the second one is just kind of cliche, but getting people in the Word. But
you have to care to be in the Word.
Do you though?
I guess. Well, at least to some extent. You have to care enough to open the book or read or listen.
Yeah.
Which admittedly is a fairly low level of care. But
yeah, but often when you get people engaged in it for the first time on some level, they don't even necessarily have to go in caring that much for you to see a decent amount of fruit. And for that matter, just encouraging people into any of the major church or spiritual disciplines, I think can be something that really starts to get people to care. Because you get people to regularly spend time in prayer, it starts to shape their heart after the things that they ought to be praying for. If you get people regularly in worship, the worship service itself is designed to get us to care. If you get people regularly reading scripture, again, you're going to spend time reading what God is trying to get us to know, and know about himself and know about his world. And that makes a lot of sense if you read it. If you spend time serving others, if you spend time fasting, if you spend time, like, this kind of goes to what you were talking about with challenging people, but the specifics of what you challenge them into, I think there are a lot of different ways you can go and get people to start to see why they should care.
It's basically the same principle as elementary school kids saying, I dare you to.
A little bit. It's also a similar principle to telling a college kid that they can change the world and then offering them free food.
Yes.
Like, you're telling people this thing can do a lot for you if you do it, so do it.
Just do it.
To quote the great philosopher Shia LaBeouf, don't let your dreams be dreams.
Yeah. I have nothing to follow that with. So I'm just going to move on.
That's fair.
I think for those of you listening, you are listening to a podcast by two Lutheran pastors. As such, I think it's fairly safe for us to assume that you care at least a little bit. You care enough that you are filling your ears with our nonsense for 35 to 42 minutes a week. Okay? And no, I am not beholden to that time estimate, so don't complain.
Yeah, if this episode ends up shorter.
Or longer. Well, it won't be longer.
Yeah. Remember, Josh, do you remember our motto from, like, early days of this show?
Still our motto, as far as I'm concerned.
That's fair.
Can't tell us what to do.
Deal with it.
You can't change you can't change the name of your podcast 3 times. You can't tell us what to do. You have to have a focus and a direction. You can't tell us what to do. Don't go on meaningless tangents, Josh. You can't tell us what to do.
That's part of podcast episodes, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong.
Correct. In any case, but I think, like we were talking about, this idea of caring leads to, well, I want to care. I want to show people that I care, especially when we're considering that can be an inspiration for other people. So what does care, maybe we should have started with this. What does caring look like? Well, on its most fundamental level, that you're there. Looking at the extremes, if someone is in worship every single Sunday and they schedule their vacation so that they are back in time to be in their church on Sunday morning, I think everyone in the world would be willing to acknowledge they care about worship. I think that's a fair jump to make.
I think if you take the step to say, as a part of your vacation planning, like, you look at where you can go to church while you're on vacation.
I'm setting up 2 very far extremes here, though. Because on the other side, if you go to worship exactly twice a year, I think it's fair when people say, you clearly don't care that much about worship. This is true. Do you care about the Bible? Well, how often do you read it? How often do you take opportunities to study it or to talk about it with people? And I'm not saying that if you don't do it regularly, you don't care necessarily. I'm just pointing out, if you only read the Bible for 5 minutes a week when it is being read in worship,
you could be missing something. You could be missing something.
So presence, I think, is a big one. And also, and this one is a little bit harder to pin down, but are you, like, excited about it? Like, when you get to go to church or when you get to talk about the Bible with your kids, like, are you excited? Like, and I'm part of the reason I say that is I'm picturing a specific guy right now who, when he gets to have these conversations, like when he gets to have Bible conversations with his kids, like, he visibly gets excited. Like, he has a big smile. His eyebrows kind of lift up. Like, he's thrilled to be in this conversation. Okay. So I think there is, do you care? Well, does it look like you care? Or is this just something you have to do? Even how do you have to go to church, or do you get to go to church? These kinds of things. And by the way, it's okay to be excited about church. Like, it's okay to be happy to be here. We're celebrating some pretty great stuff. Okay, it's a good place to be. In fact, I would say there's no place better to be. So what else does caring look like, Ben?
I think caring looks like selflessness, because, like, so trying to avoid going on a rant here, but
no, we got time, probably.
You took away my ranty boy moniker on the...
I can fix that. Come on now.
All right. So as Josh fixes that, here comes the rant. Y'all need to stop being American.
And unsubscribe.
So, what I mean by that is not that you need to move to somewhere else, though Canada is pretty cool.
Literally, it's cold. Why would you want to go somewhere where it's cold?
Anyway, the thing that we need to shake about being American is the idea that being human or being Christian or being a citizen of a country means that your life comes first. The designers of our Constitution wrote that liberty is the pursuit of happiness, right?
No, it's all men are. Is it entitled? Is that the word? To life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
There you go. That's what I was looking for. You're not. I hope that doesn't break your heart.
It's described as an unalienable right.
Yeah, unalienable right. Yeah. Sorry, it's Thursday afternoon. Josh and I both have sermon brain.
Speak for yourself. I kind of remembered what it said.
I remembered bits and pieces. I just didn't have the whole thing down perfectly. Like that idea, though.
Endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. That's the exact phrasing. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a purely Christian idea. It's Christian sounding. There's like tinges of Christianity to it, but it's not a purely Christian idea. The only thing that you are endowed with by our creator is a desire to know God and be found in him. And that doesn't mean that you will always have life or liberty or a pursuit of happiness. That often means that you will struggle and suffer and possibly die for your faith. Caring, I think, means willing to do that.
Well, and on a smaller but maybe more meaningful scale for a lot of our audience, that means you're willing to give up things you might rather be doing for the things of your faith. And it's something, this circles back to maybe where we started a little bit, but like, it seems like everything in this world claims to be the most important thing. Guys, we have dibs on that one. And I've had this conversation with people, and I'm happy to have this conversation with people. They say, but like, what gives you the authority to say, no, we actually are the most important thing? I say, God does. God says this is the most important thing. What is more important than not going to hell? I don't know. Nothing. That's the answer. That's the answer to that question. So being willing to actually give up, to take up your cross, to give up other stuff for the sake of your faith. And that's the self-sacrificing part that runs a little bit contrary to popular American culture.
Yeah. So stop being American.
Ben, you are just, you like poking bears.
I do. Sometimes you just gotta pull the pin, lob the grenade in there and see what happens, you know?
I've never in my life come into a situation where I need to throw a grenade at someone. Now, it's always an option, metaphorically speaking. I'm more of a CIA Black Ops in the middle of the night, you wake up and don't know what happened kind of approach, not a toss a grenade and see what comes out kind of approach.
I think tossing a grenade in there is like casting lots. Makes it more biblical.
I'm getting vibes of Samuel L. Jackson from Pulp Fiction.
Maybe.
I am vengeance.
Maybe.
We've talked about this a lot, so I don't think this needs to be a long additional conversation, but especially if any of you folks listening want to step into this, and the question is, well, how do I inspire my kids or my friends or my family members to care about this stuff? I think the best two strategies that we've talked about that come to mind for me are, one, model it. Show them that you care. You don't have to hide your excitement. Like, be excited you get to be in the Word and come to church and have conversations about this stuff. And two, connect with them. Be friends. And introduce them to other people if you want to get someone to come to your church, the best way to do it is to slowly introduce them to other people from your church until they have a bunch of friends, and then they find out, oh, 8 of my best friends all go to this church. I guess I should probably go to that church. One of the easiest ways to do it. Anything you want to add to that? How do we inspire? What are our practical steps?
I think other than, getting people involved in the community life piece and encouraging them into some level of spiritual discipline, I think the other big thing that can really help get people to care is just asking the right questions. And that means you have to know them well enough to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to show that you care about them,
Crisscross.
and then they might care about the stuff you care about too. Yeah.
Yep.
So if you want people to care, make sure you're caring.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
should come up with 2 different words.
If you want people to care, love them.
That sounds biblical. I like that. That'll work. That'll preach.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think if there's any other way I can kill time so we can get over that 42-minute mark. I'm kidding. We're not going to just blatantly waste your time. Probably this time. Just
I mean, we could just start reading like hockey statistics.
No, I'm still sad.
You're still in mourning.
I'm still a sad hockey fan. I was thinking that I was watching soccer last night, and it just occurred to me, I am now the fan of not one but 2 teams that have spent just tons of money to get really good teams that are hot garbage. I don't know if Atlanta United has won a game this season yet, and we have one of the most expensive offenses in the league. And the Preds set records for how much money they spent in the offseason, and we were the 3rd worst team in the league. So, it's not a great place. But anyway, let's shoot in some empty netters. What do you got, Ben? Who is not depressed about his hockey and soccer team? Well, maybe.
And I'm a little upset about my hockey team getting eliminated, but at least we made the playoffs.
That's true, you did.
Yeah. I think the thing that I would go for as a tap in an empty netter here would be just circling back to that point that we just kind of ended on. If you want people to care, you need to care yourself. And if you want to inspire someone to care about them, love them. That'll go a long way.
Before I
How
get
about
to
you,
my
Jack?
empty netter, I want to acknowledge a missed opportunity. Earlier, when you said just stop being American, it was another opportunity to add a hockey phrase to the show. I should have told you to check your chicklets. Next week. Next week, we'll make sure Ben has all his tea. My empty netter is to let your excitement show. Right? I want to make sure you feel after this episode like you have permission to be excited about this stuff, because this stuff is worth being. It's exciting. We are saved for all eternity. It's pretty cool. So, with all that being said, we hope this episode has been helpful for you. Again, just a reminder, if you have any topic ideas for where you want to see us go next season, whether that's a theme or a book of the Bible or whatever it might be, please let us know either in the comments or shoot us an email or a text, or I think we still have a Facebook page. With that, brothers and sisters, go in peace. Serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.